August 4th, 1962. 7:15 p.m. Eunice Murray had been Marilyn Monroe's housekeeper for 3 years. She'd seen the actress at her best and her worst, the glamorous movie star and the fragile woman beneath, but she'd never seen her like this. Marilyn sat curled up on the living room couch, wrapped in her white terry cloth robe. No makeup, hair uncombed. She'd been on the phone all day. Whispered conversations, angry conversations, conversations that ended with her slamming down the receiver. "Miss Monroe," Eunice said gently, "can I get you something to eat?" "You haven't had anything all day." Marilyn looked up. Her eyes were red, puffy, like she'd been crying for hours. "I'm not hungry, Mrs. Murray." "At least some tea. It might help you relax," Marilyn smiled weakly. "Nothing will help me relax tonight." Eunice sat down in the chair across from her. They'd developed an understanding over the years. More than employer and employee. Not quite friends, but something in between. "Do you want to talk about it?" Marilyn laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "If I told you what's really happening, you wouldn't believe me." "Nobody would. Try me." Marilyn looked at her for a long moment, studying her face, as if deciding whether to trust her with something important. "Mrs. Murray, if something happens to me tonight, if something goes wrong, I need you to remember what I'm about to tell you." Eunice's stomach tightened. "What do you mean, if something happens?" "Miss Monroe, you're scaring me." "Good, you should be scared, because I am." Marilyn leaned forward. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "They're coming for me tonight. I don't know when, but they're coming." "Who? Who's coming?" "The people I know too much about. The people who can't afford to let me keep talking." Eunice's mind raced. She'd heard rumors, whispers about Marilyn's connections to powerful men, politicians, mobsters, people who didn't like loose ends. "Miss Monroe, if you're in danger, we should call the police." "The police?" Marilyn laughed again. That same hollow sound. "Mrs. Murray, some of them are the police." Before Eunice could respond, the phone rang. Marilyn flinched. Stared at it like it was a snake. "Should I answer it?" Eunice asked. "No, let it ring." It rang 15 times, then stopped. Silence filled the house. Heavy. Oppressive. "Mrs. Murray," Marilyn whispered. "Come closer. I need to tell you something. And I need you to remember every word." Eunice moved to the couch, sat beside her, and what Marilyn whispered next would haunt her for the rest of her life, because those words weren't just Marilyn's last words. They were a confession, a warning, and a secret that would change everything everyone thought they knew about that night. "There's a safe deposit box," Marilyn whispered, her breath warm against Eunice's ear. "At the Bank of America on Wilshire, box number 843. The key is hidden in my bedroom, behind the photograph of me and Clark Gable." "Miss Monroe, why are you telling me this?" "Because if something happens to me, someone needs to know. Someone needs to open that box and see what's inside." "What's inside?" Marilyn pulled back slightly, looked Eunice in the eyes. "Proof, evidence, everything I've collected over the years. Names, dates, photographs, recordings, everything they don't want anyone to see." "Evidence of what?" "Of who really runs this town. Of what they do. Of who they've hurt," her voice cracked. "Of who they've killed." Eunice felt cold. "Killed?" "Dorothy Dandridge didn't overdose by accident. Jean Harlow's death wasn't just kidney failure. And there are others. So many others. Actresses who knew too much, who saw too much, who threatened to talk. And you think you're next?" Marilyn nodded. "I know I am. They've been warning me for months. Subtle at first. Anonymous calls, strange men following me. Then more direct. My doctor suddenly prescribing stronger pills. My therapist suggesting I'm paranoid. My friends distancing themselves. But why? What did you do?" "I fell in love with the wrong man. And I told him things. Secrets. Things about other powerful men. Things I'd seen at parties. At private meetings. And now he needs to make sure I can never repeat those things." "Who? Who are you talking about?" Marilyn shook her head. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that box. Promise me, Mrs. Murray. If something happens tonight, you'll get that key. You'll open that box. And you'll make sure the truth gets out. I promise. But Miss Monroe, maybe we should leave. Right now. Just get in the car and drive somewhere safe." "There is nowhere safe. Not for me. Not anymore." Marilyn stood up, paced to the window, looked out at the dark garden. "They have people everywhere. If I run, they'll find me, and it'll be worse. Then what do? We wait. And hope I'm wrong. Hope this is just my paranoia, my pills making me see threats that aren't there. But the way she said it, Eunice knew. Marilyn didn't believe that. Neither did she. The phone rang again. This time Marilyn answered. Hello? Her voice was steady, controlled. Eunice couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but she saw Marilyn's face go pale. I understand, Marilyn said quietly. 45 minutes. I'll be ready. She hung up. Who was that? Eunice asked. My doctor. He's coming over. Says he has something that will help me sleep. But you already have sleeping pills. I know. Marilyn looked at her, and in that look Eunice understood everything. Miss Monroe, don't let him in. When he comes, don't open the door. It doesn't matter if I open it or not. They'll find a way in. Marilyn walked to her bedroom. Eunice followed. Watched as Marilyn went to the photograph of her and Clark Gable, removed it from the wall. Behind it was a small hole in the plaster. Inside the hole, a key. Marilyn held it out to Eunice. Take it now, before he gets here. I can't just leave you. You have to. If you're here when he arrives, you become a witness. And witnesses don't survive. Then I'll call someone. The FBI, the press, someone who can help. There's no time. He'll be here in 40 minutes. Please, Mrs. Murray, take the key, leave, and remember everything I told you. Eunice took the key. Her hands were shaking. What about you? I'll do what I've always done. I'll perform. I'll smile. I'll pretend. And maybe, just maybe, I'll survive another night. But the way she said it, neither of them believed that. Eunice left, got in her car, drove 3 blocks away and parked. She couldn't leave. Not really, so she waited, watching Marilyn's house from a distance. 30 minutes later, a car pulled up. A man got out. Carrying a medical bag, Dr. Ralph Greenson, Marilyn's psychiatrist. He went to the door, knocked. The door opened. He went inside. Eunice waited. 1 hour, 2 hours. No lights turned off. No sounds, nothing. At 10:30 p.m. she drove back. Something felt wrong. She had a key to the house. Used it to let herself in quietly. The house was silent. Too silent. Miss Monroe? She called out softly. No answer. She walked to the bedroom. The door was locked from the inside. Miss Monroe, are you all right? Still no answer. Eunice looked through the window from outside. The curtains were drawn, but through a small gap she could see a light on. And she could see Marilyn's hand, hanging off the bed, not moving. Wait. Because what Eunice did next would determine whether Marilyn's last words meant anything. Eunice ran back inside. Pounded on the bedroom door. Miss Monroe, open the door. Nothing. She called Dr. Greenson. He arrived 20 minutes later. They broke down the door together. Marilyn lay on the bed, face down, naked, completely still. Pill bottles scattered on the nightstand. The phone off the hook. Call an ambulance. Eunice screamed, but Dr. Greenson didn't move. He just stood there, looking at Marilyn's body. His face was unreadable. Dr. Greenson, call an ambulance. It's too late, Mrs. Murray. You don't know that. We have to try. He finally turned to look at her, and in his eyes Eunice saw something that made her blood run cold. Not grief? Not surprise, just resignation, like he'd been expecting this. I'll call the police, he said quietly. You should wait in the living room. No, I'm staying here, Mrs. Murray, I'm staying. He made the call. Police arrived, detectives, photographers, coroner, the house filled with people, all of them examining Marilyn, taking notes, asking questions. Eunice told them about the evening, about Marilyn's phone calls, about her paranoia, about Dr. Greenson's visit. But she didn't tell them about the key, about the safe deposit box, about Marilyn's whispered words, because something about the way the police were handling this felt wrong. The questions they weren't asking, the evidence they weren't collecting, the way they seemed more interested in closing the case than investigating it. One detective, Sergeant Byron, took Eunice aside. Mrs. Murray, did Miss Monroe say anything unusual today? Anything about being afraid or threatened? Eunice hesitated. Marilyn's words echoed in her head. Some of them are the police. She was upset, Eunice said carefully. But she didn't say why. Did she have any visitors besides Dr. Greenson? Not that I saw. And you were here all evening? Most of it. I left around 8 p.m. to run an errand. Came back around 10:30. Byron wrote it all down. Thank you, Mrs. Murray. We'll be in touch if we have more questions. The official determination came quickly. Too quickly. Probable suicide. Overdose of barbiturates. Case closed. But Eunice knew better. She'd seen Marilyn's face when she talked about that box. Heard the certainty in her voice when she said they were coming for her. 3 days after the funeral, Eunice went to the Bank of America. Used the key. Opened box 843. Inside were documents. Dozens of them. Letters. Photographs. A small tape recorder with several cassettes. And a handwritten note in Marilyn's distinctive script. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. They probably made it look like suicide, overdose, depression, the usual story, but it wasn't, and this box contains proof. Evidence of what really happens in Hollywood. Of who really controls this town. Of crimes that have been covered up for decades. Take these documents to someone you trust. Someone who can't be bought. And make sure the truth gets out. Because I can't let my death mean nothing. Eunice's hands trembled as she went through the contents. Photographs of powerful men at private parties, doing things that would destroy their careers and reputations. Letters discussing payoffs, bribes, cover-ups, and recordings. Conversations Marilyn had secretly recorded. Politicians discussing deals. Studio heads talking about silencing problematic actors. Mob connections to Hollywood financing. It was everything Marilyn had promised. And it was dynamite. But who could Eunice trust with it? The police? They'd already dismissed Marilyn's death as suicide. The press? Half of them were on the payroll of the people implicated in these documents. She made copies, hid the originals, and then she made a decision. She would tell the story, not to the authorities, not to the press, but to anyone who would listen. At dinner parties, at social gatherings, whispered conversations about what Marilyn had really known, what she'd really said that last night. And slowly, the story spread. Rumors became questions. Questions became investigations. Not official ones, but independent journalists, activists, people who'd been trying to expose Hollywood corruption for years. One journalist, a woman named Sarah Chen, contacted Eunice. I've been investigating Marilyn's death for a book. I've heard rumors that you have information, that she told you things before she died. Eunice invited her over, showed her the documents, played her the recordings. Sarah's face went pale. My God, this is bigger than I thought. This isn't just about Marilyn. This is about systematic corruption. She knew that. That's why they killed her. Can you prove they killed her? I can prove she believed they would. I can prove she was collecting evidence against them. I can prove she had reason to be afraid. Eunice pulled out one final document. A letter Marilyn had written, dated 2 days before her death. To whom it may concern, if I am found dead, it was not suicide. I am being threatened. I have evidence of crimes committed by powerful individuals. I have shared this evidence with multiple sources. If I die, please investigate. Please don't let them cover this up. Marilyn Monroe. Sarah read the letter. Did you give this to the police? I tried. They dismissed it as the paranoid ravings of a woman on pills, because they were told to dismiss it. Over the next year, Sarah built a case, not a legal case, a journalistic one. She interviewed people who'd known Marilyn, found other witnesses who'd heard her talk about being threatened, discovered that several people close to Marilyn had also died under suspicious circumstances in the months after her death, and she published it all in a book. The last words, what Marilyn Monroe really said that night. The book was controversial. Some called it conspiracy theory, others called it courageous journalism, but it sparked conversations, investigations, questions that had never been asked before. And it all started with Eunice Murray, with a housekeeper who believed her employer's last words, who refused to let those words be forgotten. But there was still one more secret. One thing Marilyn had whispered that Eunice had never told anyone. Not Sarah, not the police, not even herself most days, because it was too painful to remember. The very last thing Marilyn had said before Eunice left that night. The final whisper. As Eunice had stood at the door, key in hand, ready to leave, Marilyn had called out one more time. Mrs. Murray? Wait, Eunice had turned back. Marilyn had walked over to her, taken her hands, and whispered, Tell them I wasn't crazy. Tell them I was just trying to survive. Tell them that the girl from the orphanage tried so hard to be good enough, smart enough, strong enough. But they wouldn't let her. They made her into something else. Something that glittered but had no soul. And when she tried to find herself again, when she tried to be real, they decided she was too dangerous to live. Tears had streamed down Marilyn's face. Tell them Norma Jean was here, that she existed, that she mattered, even if nobody remembers her name. Eunice had hugged her then, held her tight. I'll tell them, I promise, and Marilyn had smiled. A real smile, not the Marilyn Monroe smile. Just a sad, grateful smile. Thank you for seeing me, the real me. Not many people did. Those were the actual last words, not the dramatic warnings about evidence and threats, but the simple, heartbreaking plea to be remembered as human, to be seen as real. Eunice kept that promise. Every interview she gave, every time she told the story, she made sure to say Marilyn Monroe was a creation. But Norma Jean Baker was a real person, a person who deserved to be mourned, remembered, valued. 30 years later, Eunice was old, tired, but she still had the key. Still had access to that safe deposit box. The documents had been published. The recordings released. The story told, but one cassette remained. One final recording that Marilyn had marked, "Private only if I die." Eunice had never listened to it, never shared it, kept it as Marilyn's final secret, until the day before her own death she went to the bank one last time, retrieved that cassette, and listened. Marilyn's voice filled the room. Not the breathy movie star voice, but her real voice, deeper, tired, sad. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And I just want to say, I tried, I really tried. I tried to be what everyone needed. I tried to be the fantasy, the dream, the escape. But I also tried to be human, to have feelings, to matter as a person, not just an image. I don't know if I succeeded at anything except making people want something they couldn't have, something that never existed. Because Marilyn Monroe never existed. She was just light and smoke and mirrors. But underneath there was always just Norma Jean, scared, alone, trying to survive. So if you remember me, remember this. I wasn't just what you saw on screen. I was also the girl who loved to read, who wanted to be taken seriously, who fell in love too easily and trusted the wrong people, who made mistakes but never stopped trying to be better. And if someone killed me, don't let them make me into a cautionary tale about drugs or mental illness or women who can't handle fame. I handled it. I handled it for years. I just couldn't handle being silenced. The recording ended. Eunice sat in silence, tears streaming down her aged face. This was what Marilyn had wanted the world to know, not the conspiracy, not the evidence, not the scandals, but simply that she was human, that she had tried, that she had mattered. Eunice made one final decision. She donated the cassette to the National Film Registry, with instructions that it be released on the 50th anniversary of Marilyn's death. And when that day came, millions of people heard Marilyn's real voice, her real words, her real self, and they finally understood. Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a tragedy. She was a person who'd been used, silenced, destroyed, but also a person who'd fought back, who'd left evidence, who'd tried to tell the truth, and whose last words to her maid became the testimony she never got to give in life. Eunice Murray died in 1994. She was 93 years old. Her obituary mentioned that she'd been Marilyn Monroe's housekeeper, but it didn't mention the key, the box, the whispered words, because those weren't for obituaries. Those were for history, for the truth, for anyone who wanted to understand what really happened that night. The last words weren't just words. They were a legacy, a warning, and a reminder that behind every glittering image is a real person, a person who can be hurt, used, destroyed, but also a person who can fight back, even if only in whispers, even if only to one person who was willing to listen. That's what Marilyn whispered to her maid that night. Not just secrets about powerful men, but the secret of her own humanity, her own worth, her own truth. And Eunice Murray made sure that whisper became a shout, that the last words weren't the end of the story, but the beginning of understanding. What Marilyn whispered that night changed everything. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly, persistently, it changed how people saw her, how they understood her, how they remembered her, not as just a sex symbol who died tragically, but as a person who tried to tell the truth and paid the ultimate price. And that truth, whispered in the dark to a housekeeper who cared enough to listen, became the most powerful thing Marilyn Monroe ever said. because the truth doesn't need to be shouted to matter. Sometimes a whisper is enough, as long as someone is listening, as long as someone remembers, as long as someone cares enough to pass it on. That's what happened with Marilyn's last words. A whisper that became an echo that became history, history that became truth. And all because Eunice Murray believed her, believed that what Marilyn whispered mattered, believed that her last words deserved to be heard. That belief changed everything. Not just for Marilyn's legacy, but for everyone who came after. Everyone who'd been silenced. Everyone who'd whispered truths that powerful people didn't want heard. Marilyn's last words proved that whispers can be powerful, that truth doesn't die just because the person who spoke it does, that as long as one person remembers, one person cares, one person refuses to stay silent, the whisper continues. And that's the real story of what Marilyn Monroe whispered to her maid that night, not just the specific words, but the power of those words to echo across decades, to inspire others to listen, to remember, to believe, because in the end, that's all any of us want, to be believed, to be remembered, to have our truth matter. Marilyn got that, even if it came too late to save her. Even if it came in the form of last words whispered in the dark. She got to be heard, she got to be believed, she got to matter, and that whisper changed everything. So the next time someone whispers a truth to you, a secret, a fear, a confession, listen. Really listen. Because you might be the only person they trust enough to tell. You might be the only one who can carry their words forward when they no longer can. Think about the people in your life who've tried to tell you something important. Did you hear them? Did you believe them? Or did you dismiss their words as paranoia, exaggeration, or drama? Marilyn Monroe's last words matter because someone listened, because someone believed, because someone refused to let those whispers fade into silence. Who in your life is whispering truths that need to be heard? And will you be the person who listens? The person who remembers? The person who makes sure their words don't die with them? Because that's how we honor the people we've lost. Not with flowers or monuments, but by listening when it matters, by believing when it's hard, by carrying their truths forward when they can't.